Welcome back, everyone.
Hey guys, good to be back here in Singapore. It's been a little more than a week at this point, and we wanted to tell you a little bit more about our VTL trip
So we arrived on a Monday morning, pretty early after a 17-hour flight.
in economy. At least there were 2 meal services throughout, but I would say that I knocked out for most of the flight. At some point, I woke up to watch movies again. I think we had already gone through like 10 hours of the flight, which was awesome.
Getting off the plane, pretty much everything is the same, but we knew that after we picked up our luggage that we would have to go ahead and get our PCR test.
Yeah, so as part of the VTL requirements, even though you can get back to the country and not quarantine, you are required to do a on-arrival PCR test. It costs $125 per person. You need to book it in advance and you do it at the airport. And then the new rule that happened as we were in the US was 7 straight days after that we would have to test as well.
I was quite nervous. That was my first time doing a PCR test. So when the lady was walking me through it, I let her know ahead of time that it was my first time. She's like, it's not bad. Don't worry about it.
Really wasn't too bad, this
No.
PCR test. We had heard horror stories about how far up it goes and things like that. But this one was kind of different because there were 2 components.
Oh yeah, that's right. So she did surprise me. I went first, and Harry was kind of sitting in the back watching. I think she did the throat first, which I was not expecting. I thought it was just the nose, and then she went ahead and did the nose.
Yeah, and the throat sucked. But the nose, surprisingly, wasn't too bad. So after the PCR test, we then were required to take private hire back. So no public transportation. We went down and got a grab from the terminal pickup point. We just have to go back home and wait for an email or like a text message whether or not we were positive or negative. And if we were negative, that basically means we're free to go out.
So we got our results maybe about 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and of course it was negative. Woohoo!
Yes. So thankfully it was negative, which meant, all right, let's figure out what we want to eat. I don't even remember where we went that day.
Day 2, we have to do self-ART test, which we had free tests waiting for us at home from the government that we had received a while back. And that was my first time, I think,
Yeah, I think
doing
so.
my self-ART. Harry had done it once before, and I felt like I was doing like a science experiment, and I was like so nervous that I was going to do something wrong.
Drip it into the little tray
It's
and
very
everything.
interesting.
Yeah, but it's easy. It's not too bad. You don't have to shove it up too far. And it'll just come back either negative, positive, or if you didn't do correctly, it'll show that. So after we did the test, you then submit your results online. So you get an email that says, please submit your day 2 results. And it's just you got to be really honest with yourself, but it's just, did you test positive, negative? Doesn't ask for a picture or anything, which is kind of, I don't know. They could.
That's what I was expecting when it said,
too.
submit your results online. I was like, oh, we have to.
Yeah, but you have a
submit.
big disclaimer at least, and it's like if you
Lie.
commit perjury or whatever, there's like a $20,000 fine or you're gonna get caned or whatever it might be. We tested negative. So both of us were negative on day 2, which again meant after we tested, which we did earlier in the morning, means that we could go out and about and just carry on our day like normal. Day 3,
We have to go into a testing center. So that was our first time. We tried finding a location that was closest to us, which we chose Tiong Bahru because we knew that we would go to the market after, get some lunch.
as long as we were negative.
Fine.
Yeah.
We waited maybe about 5 minutes before they checked our ID. They made sure that we paid $15,
Yep.
which you have to do ahead of time
gotta
online.
Book it ahead of time as well.
Yep. And fortunately, Harry got an appointment time earlier than I did, but we just went ahead and went together, and they were fine with it because we just do the testing ourselves, and we were expecting someone to literally sit in front of us and watch us administer the test, but they just kind of said, here's your test, go find an empty table, and we'll be with you in a little bit.
Yeah, so after that, they check our results. We were just sitting there watching, the color of the paper turn, and that came back negative as well. So the lady came by, she asked for our particulars and then submitted it basically how we did it online, but I guess they have a different portal so it knows that it was supervised, or at least she saw the results that we had. At that point, we were free to go out and about, which was awesome because Tiong Bahru has probably my favorite hawker center at this point in time. I know there's plenty more out there to explore. That was fun. We grabbed some lunch. I got some new coffee beans. All was good then. So moving on to day 4.
Day 4.
Unlucky number for Chinese.
Oh yeah, maybe that's
Yeah.
why. So day 4, we wake up. I was supposed to be going into work that day, so I knew that I wanted to test early just to make sure everything was okay before the day got started. And we woke up, we tested ourselves, and I actually dropped my squirting stick.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of frustrating because I was like, oh, whatever results I get, maybe we should need to do it again. Wasn't sure. So Harry his line was starting to come up because he administered his fine. But it started to show
The 2 lines, which you don't want to see because if you see a line on a C and a T, that means you're positive. It was fairly faint, but it was still there.
it was still early. It wasn't like a full 15 minutes.
Yeah. And yours was pretty obvious, right?
Mine was obvious, but I was worried that maybe it's because I had made a mistake.
Yeah.
So we said we definitely need to test again before we fill out the online form saying what the results were. So we tested again. And
that one was very obvious that it was 2 lines.
For both
so
of us.
we tested positive. And here we are now, sitting at home, having COVID. 4 days in, we were halfway through the day, we needed to get to day 7 and then we were free. But the symptoms were fairly mild, I'd say. Like, if anything, it was like cold-like symptoms. I will say on the flight, I felt somewhat congested for part of the flight. I did have a coughing fit here and there as well. So it was shocking to see like the PCR test and like the 3 consecutive days of tests come back negative until day 4.
So on the online form, we went ahead and said we're positive. It says if you test positive, you need to take a confirmatory PCR test at a different testing site. So we scheduled that. We didn't have to pay for. The government actually pays for it. So if anyone in Singapore ever feels like they might have COVID and they want to get checked out, the government will actually pay for the PCR test.
PCR tests aren't cheap in general, so it's great that they do that.
Tried to find the closest.
Yeah, they had fewer locations.
Yep.
I forgot where we ended up.
I think it was Ang Mo Kio.
Yeah, it was Ang Mo Kio. So it was the old primary school. So it was kind of cool. Like they basically fitted the entire primary school into a COVID testing site. So we ended up going. We had to do private hire, so we grabbed a taxi.
Which I felt guilty about because
Here we are
you
sitting in the
had
back of a
COVID.
taxi, and we're like, we have COVID, but we left a note on the taxi app saying we're going in for a confirmatory PCR tests, and he seemed okay with it.
We did wear the...
N95s.
Yes.
We were extra cautious this time around.
It was very painful, so I can't imagine having the doctors and nurses who
those
actually
masks
wear those
suck.
24/7.
I don't know if it's the ones that we got, but maybe our heads are just really big. But
Maybe.
man, after like just that part, I had like
We had
marks
the
all
lines.
over. It was crazy. But anyway, we get to the testing site, and it was again they like walked us through. They put a
We got a
sticker,
sticker.
yeah, that said COVID
like-
positive or something like that.
It was our scarlet letter, basically, so I was like trying to hide it from people who were not going in the same direction as us.
We got there, we were like, okay, we've done a PCR test before, so hopefully it was going to be similar, and lo and behold, as we're prepping our throats for another swab, this one was a little bit different.
So they're very thorough. They asked us about our symptoms, made sure our particulars were correct and all that stuff. And I was the lucky one to go first.
Ladies first.
Yes. She handed me some tissues. I wasn't sure what those were for. But then she said to pull my mask down, but to keep my mouth covered. So that means they were only going to do a nose swab. And she goes ahead and says it's going to be this deep. like they have the swab test and she shows you how much is going to go in. I was like, whoa, this is quite different than the one from the airport. And she was like, oh yeah, this is very different. I was like, but it's a PCR.
Yeah.
So she did it. She did both nostrils, and my eyes were so watery. Like I could feel my body shaking. Like I suffered.
This is the PCR test that everyone talks about when they're like, oh man, good luck with it.
Mm-hmm. So we had to take a taxi again back home, and we had to wait until we got our PCR results back, and then whatever the results were from that confirmatory PCR, MOH or someone from the government would kind of let us know what are the next steps.
Yeah, and this time the results didn't come back till the next morning. So basically that whole day we had to just stay at home. The next morning is when we found out that came back positive as well. I was kind of expecting it because we did 2 ART tests and they both came back positive each. What were your thoughts that morning?
I was quite upset. I didn't think it would have happened to us. I mean, Harry was the one who had like a little bit of symptoms on the airplane, like he said, but I just figured,
It was LA.
Our
I
body.
definitely think we caught in LA.
I was just thinking, it's jet lag. It's our body's exhausted from traveling and moving around, and I just thought maybe it's our body's just trying to readjust.
Mm-hmm. I think we first got like a text or something that says you are to remain at home. You'll get contacted by the Ministry of Health or the MOH. And honestly, it was a little bit confusing because I feel like we both got like multiple calls from different people.
Yep.
I even got a call from like the Ministry of Manpower about it as well. We basically were told at that point that we were on isolation order, or IO as they shorten it, which basically means that we have to stay at home for a 10-day period, starting the day that we got our results. And now we are at day 6, which is crazy because I thought I would go insane, and honestly it hasn't been too bad. I think the first day was the worst for me.
I'll be honest, I think it was quite difficult. Like day 2, day 3, I think I kept it to myself.
Yeah, you didn't tell me.
But I was surprised that I was feeling that way.
Yeah, and it really sucked because the whole point of taking a VTL was to avoid the quarantine period, and this wouldn't have happened if they didn't do the 7-day testing scheme that they just updated. But one of the more frustrating things for us was the fact that as of the day that we did get tested, they were changing the protocols on how you would quarantine if you did test positive. And they break it down into 3 different sections. I think the first one is like Protocol 1, which essentially is an isolation order, which is what we got, the 10-day quarantine. Protocol 2 is a scheme where you basically, if you test positive, you're low-risk individual, meaning you're not elderly, you aren't pregnant, and you have mild to no symptoms, it would be a 72-hour quarantine period, and then at that point you would just test yourself until it comes back negative, and at that point you're free to go. Protocol 3 is like your health risk warning, so anyone who's come in contact or lives with someone who had contracted COVID are issued that. Our initial thought was we would be on Protocol 2 because we were telling them our symptoms and everything like that, and we were like, well, we're not high risk, we don't have severe illness or symptoms, so why are we quarantining for a 10-day period? And they couldn't really give a straight answer. But it seems like this whole scheme was fairly new to everyone, and the reason that they kept telling us was that we tested with a PCR test, and as soon as you do a PCR test, you're essentially issued an isolation order. But the problem was we were required to do the PCR test as part of the vaccinated travel lane. They basically said, like, if we were assessed by a doctor or something and they're like, oh yeah, your symptoms are mild, then yes, you can do Protocol 2. But because there was no doctor present when they did the PCR, essentially just means that we had to do the isolation order. If you are on a vaccinated travel lane and you do test positive, you're likely not going to be able to do a Protocol 2 quarantine. It's going to be an isolation order.
We had always joked about, Harry would never survive.
No.
2 weeks back in the day when it was a 2-week period in a hotel, or even now being at home. And it's weird thinking that the balcony is our only like fresh air that we've been getting. So to keep busy, Harry's been working here and there. We've been watching a lot of Netflix shows,
Sleeping in.
sleeping in a lot,
Yeah.
cooking. We've been enjoying the experience of ordering food.
Yeah, it is kind of convenient that we do have our online grocery delivery services. So we use Redmart, which is part of Lazada. I honestly don't know how they make money because there's a delivery fee, but then that delivery fee is waived if you go over a certain amount. And a lot of the groceries that are on their website are essentially the same price as our grocery store downstairs, Cold Storage. And the quality's fine. Like, we got fresh produce and everything. The pineapple was delicious. We did do some grab food orders as well, like for the days that we didn't want to cook. That's been pretty good too. Prices are reasonable. There is a delivery fee for that, but think about it as like a service charge, I guess, like when you're in a restaurant.
When we were back in the US, we watched the new Spider-Man movie, and we realized that maybe we have not seen a lot of the movies that.
More like she hasn't.
That's true. There's a lot of missing pieces or a lot of things that people are reacting to that I was like,
She's not familiar with the Marvel universe, so each night we've been watching in chronological order a Marvel movie every night. Keep saying we also watch other shows, so I think we just finished, what was that Korean one?
Singles Inferno.
Yeah, Singles Inferno, kind of our bachelorette type guilty pleasure, I guess.
Yeah. Not as crazy.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, and cooking has been keeping us busy. So tonight we're actually baking, which is fun, and some video games here and there. So we've been okay. In fact, it's crazy to think that in 4 more days we'll be free.
So on Sunday, that'll be our day 10. And at noon, I don't know if we're going to receive a phone call, if we're going to receive
like
a
a
text message
or something
that says you're free to go out.
Yeah,
That's
it's like
when it's over.
Discharge notice or something like that, and it says there's no testing required. So we're still gonna test just to like play it safe, because I don't think it would be fair for us to go out and about even though we are still positive and it's been 10 days. When you are quarantining from home, and I guess that's the silver lining in all of this, is we didn't have to go into a dedicated hotel facility, shell out $1,000-something to quarantine in a hotel room that probably won't have a balcony or the space that we have here. But throughout the whole process, you do have specific phone lines you can call if there's an emergency. We're all assigned something health buddy or something like that. Although, to be honest, it didn't seem like they knew what they were doing either. It's still fairly new for them.
I don't think they realized that we were both positive, living in the same household. I think that they needed to coordinate that a little better.
Yeah, it seems like there's a bit of a lack of communication, so they were confused why there were 2 chews who both tested positive, and they thought it was a mistake. It's like, well, we could be husband and wife that just traveled together and both tested. I will say that, like, my biggest feedback is there needs to be better communication across all the organizations that are part of this whole quarantine or health protocols, just because it seems odd that if you're on the vaccinated travel lane, you're not entitled to the same protocols that someone who tested positive in the community would go through, even though it's the same COVID. It's not different, unless there was like a brand new strain that was introduced, which, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. That's the update for us. We're doing fine despite having COVID, and each day we're getting better and better. Some days we definitely fall back into a little bit of congestion and sinus infection type things, but we're on the road to recovery, and we're thankful to have our health, and I'm still thankful that we did end up doing our 1-month trip to the US. So
definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and if you guys have questions, feel free to drop a note in the comments section. We're happy to answer anything that you are confused about. It is a really confusing process, so there's a lot of paperwork and things that you need to submit, so definitely let us know if there's anything we can help you out with, and hope this was informative.
We'll see you in the next one.